Hello again, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your entrees. It is time now to have a really interesting discussion, and hopefully you all get something so fabulous from it today. Dr. Catherine Ball is one of Australia's most respected scientific futurists, drone experts and associate professor. In 2021, she hosted NEC's Women in Leadership series that you can find on YouTube and NEC's website. And in 2022, released her book, Converge, a futurist's insights into the potential of our world as technology and humanity collide. Rachael Neumann is the founding partner at Flying Fox Ventures, an early-stage venture capital firm propelling Australian and New Zealand companies across the globe. Over her career, Rachael has worked with thousands of early startups and head of startups for Amazon Web Services ANZ. A partner at StartMate and in her 2 federal government appointments distributing commercialisation and scale funding to early-stage Australian companies. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Dr. Catherine Ball and Rachael.
There's a high risk of ABBA. Do I have to press something? It's red. Hello, 1 1. Mama! Did I get that?
You hit that note.
I'm going to start a timer in a second because we've only got 15 minutes. But I don't know.
That's what they think.
Yeah, that's what they. Are you ready for the long haul? You think this?
Then
is
there's
be
the song portion.
Yeah, the musical as we leave. Lies, damned lies, and statistics. When we talk about women in anything, we always hear these numbers thrown around. And quite frankly, when we start peeling the layers of the onion, a lot of those numbers actually fizzle to be percentiles of what they seem to be. Just very quickly, can you throw some numbers at us that have real guts behind them that might be a shock to everybody in the room as to what's actually real in the current state of play with women in business in your ecosystem?
Yeah, so as was mentioned in my intro, I'm one of the founding partners of Flying Fox Ventures. So we're an early stage investment firm, and we back Australian and New Zealand founders to grow normally tech companies across the globe. And so I am mostly investing in software companies, but also sometimes in deep tech, hardware, et cetera. And I'm investing across industries as a strategy. And one of the things that we are always hearing is that there is a chronic underinvestment in female founders. And then in my world, where I'm a capital allocator, it's probably even worse that there are so few women who are actually allocating capital. So the statistics, they bounce around, but right now we hear globally, and it's probably the same in Australia, that only about 2 to 3% of venture funding is going to female-only led companies. The numbers go up to about 15% if it's including a female founder, so a mixed team, and then the rest obviously are going to male-founded companies. And then I think in Australia there are 2 venture firms that have all-female leadership teams, and I am one of them. Now, at Flying Fox, we don't have a gender lens in our investing, but I think because amazing women find amazing women, and I think women have an ability to see underestimated founders in different ways. At Flying Fox, the number that is publicly shared is that 38% of our capital is deployed behind female founders. Now, the sad news is that we just recut those numbers about 2 weeks ago, and that number has gone down. And one of the things I was sharing with you, Catherine, is that in spite of all of the talk about the lack of funding for female founders, the lack of women who are allocating capital, and some of the programs that have been put in place to change that, across the board we are seeing the numbers go down instead of up. And we don't have enough time to talk about all of the underlying causes there, but it's very challenging and disheartening to see that. And it's going to take a multi-pronged approach to fix it.
A line in the sand, maybe, and a bit of a reckoning, actually, probably. Waiting to see the Ed Husick's department's Women in STEM Diversity report, for one thing. Now, yourself, you have a journey in professional sports, lacrosse and soccer. I hear are things that you've been a big fan of. Now, you're also an owner of Angel City, which, if anyone hasn't heard, is a soccer club in Los Angeles, the City of Angels. Now, before we get into the reason why you started that and how you started that, can you think of maybe 3 direct, tangible aspects of how you work your general business ecosystem that's either overlapping with that or can be applied directly to professional women in sport or women in, sports organisations looking at professionalising the women portion of their sport?
So, there are lots of different ways we can go with that question, but I'll just back up. Like, I am a sports mad person, right? I've always been an athlete, washed up athlete now. And so I'm absolutely passionate about sport, but it's also just knowing what sport unlocks in society, especially women's sport, and what it unlocks for girls and society more generally is unbelievably powerful. And so the more we can have women playing sport or girls at an early age, just like the better we are as society. Now, the issue with that is that there is a chronic underfunding in women's sport. And I always say when we're going to look back and we're going to have a reckoning on why women's sport was underinvested, and it's going to be because of misogyny and racism and all of these underlying societal issues. But we're also going to see that it was gross business negligence. There has never been a better business opportunity than investing in women's sport. And so everyone who is sleeping on this opportunity, like, at your own peril. And at Angel City, and I'll talk about the origin story in a second, but just to give you some numbers there, when we started the club, we bought an expansion license from our league in America, and we paid about $2 million for that expansion license. Last year, 2 more cities, so Bay FC, which is the San Francisco Bay Area, and Boston started new clubs as well. They paid $53 million for the same license that we bought 2 years ago. So that's a 26x cost improvement. And in 10 years, we're going to look back and say, damn, Boston and Bay Area got that at a steal. So, like, we are truly at the ground level, in women's sport, and there is so much opportunity from both the societal impact as well as the financial and the business impact. So, there are lots of personal reasons why I got involved, but as an investor, on paper, this is one of my best ones.
We are not here to give financial advice.
That's usually my disclaimer, yeah. Talk to your accountant.
Talk to your accountant. So in terms of can you think of a couple of these translations that you get from if you're investing in a robotics company or you're looking at something that's early stage or something that's even prescient, that's just coming over the horizon? How do you risk rank that? I mean, when you look at professionalized women's, it obviously looks like a no-brainer. The numbers are already starting to come across the horizon, but how have we had to prove this? What have you learned from other parts of the business ecosystem that can be applied to this? Or is it already gone? Has the horse already bolted?
Well, I mean, there are similarities and they're not. So in early stage investing, it requires that you have lots of at-bats. That's a baseball analogy, so I have to figure out how to translate that. I guess in cricket you have bats. But you need to take lots of shots, lots of attempts in order to kind of get that one that's going to be the breakthrough company. And so you need a high risk appetite, but you need to recognize that with high risk, when you get it right, is high reward. And it's a little bit different in sports, although the thing, like I've noticed with Angel City, is that there are certain rhythms and trajectories that you need to have a tolerance for. One, like, things take time. They require a lot of nurturing and capital, talent, getting the right people on the bus. And then you need to have patience. And then when it takes off, it's going to be incredible. So I think that my journey into professional sports as an investor is part of my general, like, high risk, high reward appetite. And then if I think about what makes them the same, whether it's a software company or a robotics company, is that it always comes down to the people. Always. And so I always say that I'm in tech, but at a certain point, the ones and zeros disappear, and it's all just a human endeavor. And finding incredibly talented people, figuring out what motivates them, what matters to them, and why, and bringing them along for the journey and having their sights set on something that is, like, so big and audacious, but you have a strategy to get there. I mean, that's kind of with any organization, but it's never more true than when you're doing something that might be for the first time.
So having a good risk appetite, having fingers in lots of pies might be the British analogy I'd have been groping for there. But what are some of your biggest lessons and learnings? And can you share a real example or two of a project or a plan that went awry? Did you get the metric around the people wrong, the metric around the money wrong?
Well, this is where if we had more time, I could fill that all with all of my mistakes. And that's another thing is the longer you're in business, the more mistakes you have, and you find out, of course, you learn the most in those than in your victories. And the same thing on the field. You don't learn as much when you win the game, but you sure learn a heck of a lot when you're walking into that locker room with a brutal loss. It's funny, as an investor, and no disrespect to any of my underlying investors in the room, but if I took a bet and I got it wrong because I thought that the hypothesis, I thought it would happen sooner than it was. I kind of mistimed the market, or a regulatory change came that I wasn't expecting, or technology, like right now it's progressing at a neck-breaking pace. Like if I got that wrong, if I tried to predict the future and got that wrong, I can wear that. And I mitigate that risk by making lots of investments and diversifying them. But where I look back and I think, shit, that really was not a good call, is when I allowed a B player to get an investment because I was so sold in what he or she was trying, usually he, what they were trying to solve. And I just thought, like, that's an inevitability. Like, any dummy could pull that off. And the truth is, B players can't pull it off. B players can't go the distance. B players hire C players. They run a D strategy. And no matter how good and ripe the opportunity is, they'll never get it across the line. And so when I look back and I kind of kick myself, and I hopefully don't do it that often anymore, it's because I knew that that wasn't a top-notch entrepreneur, and I was instead lured by the opportunity. It always comes down to the people.
So when we talk about people behind the teams, behind the numbers, behind the names, we have lots of names for things like Women in Science and Entrepreneurship grants and Female Founders grants and various other things with the words female and women in the titles. One of the things we discuss as women who own businesses, and I currently own 5, diversity washing is something that's a bit of a vampire in the room, especially with regard to elements of financial control by men of women, particularly if marriage and family is involved. Have you come up against this? Is this something that we're talking about more openly now, in terms of how businesses approach and how they actually honestly describe who is in charge of that business according to the Corporations Act 2001, rather than just, oh, my wife runs the business?
Yeah, I love the Corporations Act of 2001. I read
Love
it on
it
a daily
too.
basis. I throw it at people, actually. And so what I think you're getting at is right now, because there is an acknowledgement that we have a major problem with the representation of women in business, or women in startups and in venture capital, is that there are lots of programs being put in place. The problem is that there's a lot of gamification for people who are chasing after that grant funding. And so I was involved in, as was mentioned, the Boosting Female Founders program, which was a kind of a clusterfuck of a program. But it had really good intentions. But one of the things that Catherine and I were chatting about was how many of those companies, while on paper might have been women-owned, actually were under the control and the daily operational control of men. And that's a big issue. And so we're seeing just a lot of pink washing, right? And so anytime you have some sort of incentive there are nefarious players that will kind of tweak things. And I even confess that within my own portfolio, there's this one company that's run by 2 guys. I met them from day dot. I've been working with them for 4 years. And then they put out their latest deck, and the female co-founder popped up, and it's the wife of one of these founders, and they said, the female-founded business. And I was like, I have never met this woman in the 4 years that you've been running this company. And so even within my own portfolio, people are trying to, play that card. It's funny, like, to your own peril, because they're not getting funded very well. And so, yeah, that's really frustrating, because there are so many incredible female entrepreneurs who already there are structural barriers that are in place, which is why these programs are necessary. And then they go up and they're competing with companies that don't qualify. Like, that's very problematic. On the other hand, I mentioned this, that there's a company that I've invested in called Mass Dynamics, incredible company that's playing in the proteomics space. 4 co-founders, which we rarely see such a big co-founding team. 4 co-founders, one is a woman, and it was her idea. She has designed the whole product. She's the CEO. She runs the show. The 2 other guys are engineers, and one is a part-time scientist, which is important in discovery. This is her business. And when she applied for funding that was for female companies, she was not eligible because she didn't own enough of the company. And so it's kind of like we're getting effed both ways. So yeah, this is why we're seeing the numbers going the wrong direction.
So if we move on to something like ESG investing, purpose with profit businesses, areas that women tend to, I think, skew towards in terms of the ecosystem of businesses, a lot of social enterprise and this idea of, oh, can we make money because we're trying to do something good with the business? What are these just more buzzwords? Is this just more greenwashing? What can you do in your business around team building or around the ecosystem, or advice for anyone here who's thinking of going for funding with a business or starting a business about being hard-lined around making money and not being ashamed about making money when you've got a really good business idea, and whether it has social aspects, ESG aspects, which is enviro, social and governance aspects, or climate tech, that actually it's still a good thing to be a going concern.
Yeah, I think so. And I just had this conversation yesterday on a panel that I was on with a fellow impact investor. And I am not an impact fund, but I bet 80% of my investments would qualify if look through, this was the Giant Leap Fund, look through their lens. And same thing with ESG. We've adopted an ESG policy, and most of to date, our 54 companies we've invested in would tick all of the boxes. Now, we don't go ahead and call ourselves that because, one, I don't believe that these two things are different. I think that there is no delineation between doing the right thing and making money. I think inherently the most commercial opportunities are the ones that are impacting the biggest total addressable markets, and unfortunately that's in things like health, education, environment. And so actually, I see this, the Venn diagram as a circle. Now, people tell me, people actually say, why aren't you playing your pink card? You're all female owned. I was like, we are a venture fund that happens to have 3 exceptional partners who happen to all be women. We have an incredible portfolio of 54 companies that happen to be impactee because they're solving the world's biggest problems. And so sometimes I think the purist in us, maybe it's working to our detriment because those buzzwords are attracting a lot of excitement right now. But if I think about what my job is, I have one responsibility first and foremost, and that is to my investors. And I have a fiduciary responsibility to make them a shit ton of money. With that shit ton of money, based on who my investors are and based on who I am, I know we're going to have a shit ton of impact. And I think that what matters to me then is getting the right people on my bus, making sure that my underlying investors align with my values, that we as a firm are values forward and values driven. And with all of these acorns that we're amassing, we're going to have an incredible opportunity to have an impact at a very large scale. And I'm unapologetic about that.
So where do I invest? Okay, we're out of time, but what's next for you on the near horizon? I mean, obviously you have long horizons, medium horizons, short horizons. What's coming up before Christmas, love, or even in the next 9 months?
Well, in Flying Fox world, we continue to find incredible founders and back them. We're making at least 1 investment a month, so no moss on that rock. We're raising a new fund, which is going to just put more dry powder in our pockets to back incredible founders. On the sports side of things, anyone here in the room who has a pulse has seen the excitement that the World Cup has brought to Australia and has brought to light. Yeah. What a month, huh? Man, I feel bad. No startup investments happened from Rachael in those 4 weeks, I'll tell you. But I think everyone saw what an incredible moment that was, and it brought to light what an opportunity still exists. Obviously, I've learned a few things in the Angel City journey. I think that Australia is ripe for some new exciting things, so watch that space.
Can we raise our hands and cheers for this amazing woman? Thank you so much.
Both Dr. Catherine and also Rachael. That was so inspiring, so incredible. 2 very intelligent, well-spoken and inspiring women. I hope we all feel really motivated by what we've heard today.